When I need to focus and drown out the rest of the world, I have a couple of go-to instrumental albums. Music for 18 Musicians by Steve Reich, specifically the None Such recording, and Goodbye to Language by Daniel Lanois and Rocco DeLuca. These albums have some very distinct qualities. One, I can listen to them as non-distracting background music. Two, I can have them on repeat without getting sick of hearing them. And three, if I want to, I can stop working, dive in, and really enjoy whatever is happening musically at the moment. There's a certain hidden quality of engagement in this type of music, which is why I only have a couple of these go-to albums. Now, MFTJ's 2021 release, titled My Mom's Getting a Horse, is a new album to add to my work/flow playlist. There's almost nothing overtly virtuosic happening, there are no WTF or jaw-dropper moments, and there's nothing so stylistic that you'd know it features Mike Keneally on guitar, keyboard, and various other instruments. Mike pairs up with a musical partner in crime, Scott Schorr, who runs the very excellent Lazy Bones record label. It's a stream of consciousness album with a great energy and an uplifting vibe. Now, like the Reich and Lanois albums, this MFTJ release is built on motifs instead of melodies. There's probably compositional structure in each track, but it's hardly noticeable upon first listen. The music just happens, and it feels completely natural. It rides that very precarious line where lesser musicians often fall into the "why does this album exist?" pit of irrelevance, but MFTJ never falls in. It's just a solid, fun, and engaging listen, whether for environmental or intentional enjoyment. MFTJ stands for Mankind's Final Traffic Jam, and My Mom's Getting a Horse is the second release by this musical duo. The first, self-titled record is also very good, but I think it's a little more bold, which makes it harder for me to lose myself in it. Whereas the first record has more of a rock band feel, My Mom's Getting a Horse could be classified as an electronic album. The drums and percussion in particular are more treated, and they blend organically with the rest of the instrumentation. I interviewed Scott and Mike back in February 2021, and we'll dive into that after this next sentence. If you like what you hear, then check out the album at mftj.bandcamp.com or lazybones.com. So, Scott, it sounds like you're kind of the mastermind behind this, at least based on what I read in the liner notes. Could you introduce the project and talk about how it came about?
Well, I'm definitely not the musical mastermind, but in terms of how the project came about, I had a lot of rhythm tracks that I wanted to find a home for. And I had this really cool name that I had to get done with the band name, Mankind's Final Traffic Jam. And so I had met Mike years ago, and we talked about doing a project together. And the years passed, and I kept having, writing more tracks and still loving this name and knowing it had to find a home. And I sent the rhythm tracks, drums, some bass, keyboards, a lot of riffs to Mike, seeing if he was interested, and he put his magic on, and interview's done. That's it. Nothing more to say, bro.
For just about every tune, Scott will send a very basic rhythm track. It tends to stay in one location in terms of a tonal center. And so he'll say, okay, it's this many BPM and it's in this key, and it'll consist of layered percussion, a combination of humanly played percussion that because Scott is a drummer primarily, as I think that's your first instrument, right, Scott?
Yeah.
And then layering that with other percussion and programmed rhythms and loops that he's gathered, until you end up with 4 or 5 layers of percussion from different sources, but all in the same tempo and all collectively describing this thing, this texture, this rhythmic happening. And then he can mute different of these 4 or 5 drum sources throughout the tune, so that there's undulating stuff. It's not like a constant block of a rhythmic sound. There's contours to it. And then there's some kind of a bass thing, and sometimes harmonic content on keyboards, whether it be effects or melodies or chord progressions or a combination of all that. And then he says, improvise on this stuff. So for the first album, I was at Double Time Studio with Jeff Forrest engineering, the guy who engineered my first bunch of records on Immune. And I just brought in a whole bunch of guitars and basses because I didn't have any home recording set up at the time. And spent, I think, a total of 2 days. I think the initial hit was 2 days. And I barely listened to the stuff before going in the studio. You know, Scott sent me these things and said, "What do you think?" And I didn't listen down even from start to finish. I would listen to just like, 30 seconds of each one, and just like imagine, could I play over this? Sure, I could play over this, and then just end up with 10 tunes that way. So totally improvisational responses in the studio to these grooves. I'll do maybe 2 runs on electric guitar and then a couple of keyboard things. And then if I'm hearing a bass part, I'll try my hand at a bass part. And in most cases, the majority of the cases, I'm not hearing anything else that I've played. I'm not playing along with a previous improvisation. I'm not trying to craft things. 5% of the time I'll play a line and go, oh, shit, I need to harmonize with that. I need to do a little 3-part guitar harmony here, and I'll impose that on the proceedings. But the general brief for the thing is for me to just improvise without hearing any of my other improvs and send these many tracks to Scott, and then he has the vainglorious task of digging through all of this stuff, some of which is absolute garbage because it's just me responding in the moment to this thing that I've never played along with before. So all of my, except for those rare occasions when I stop and embellish an idea, all of my contributions to this thing are very spontaneous. They're just falling out of me in the moment. And I think that has an impact on the overall sound. These aren't really refined performances. These are very raw performances, which I sent to Scott, and then he goes digging through and finds what he considers to be the essential bits, the gems that define whatever this song is. Essentially, if I can characterize it this way, Scott, I think he's just like instinctively looking for the little bits of my improvs that seem to resonate the best with the groove that he's already set up for the tune, and or maybe drive it in some unexpected place that he wasn't expecting, but that he's digging. And so he glued together a new structure for the thing. He sends that to me, and I go back in the studio, speaking of the first album, because for the second album I did all of it at home, all of these steps. And then I do a second round of improv in response to the construction that he has made out of my first round of improvs. And then I send those, these new tracks of spewed out garbage. Although in many cases he has requested specific instrumentation. Like he'll send me back his construction number 1 of my improv stuff and say, dude, it would be sweet if you did like a slide guitar on this. I'm hearing a couple of acoustics. And at that point he imposes some production input and those kind of ideas on my improvs by saying, I really would love for you to add this kind of an electric part, or I'm really hearing acoustic piano here. So I take on his input, but I'm still like pretty much thinking improvisationally, although often he suggested some impressionistic way of describing how he wants the thing to feel. So that's in mind as I'm doing the improv.
I've been playing in bands since I was in high school and been doing this full time for, since I was 25 years old. And Lazy Bones recording started as a result of going through the major label system with a band and just seeing how gross and false and soul-sucking it was, at least my experience, and realizing that it had very little to do with music.
What band?
I'm sorry?
What was that band?
Band called Nero's Rome, and they were signed to Capitol, and we were the next big thing, and they loved us and loved me, and then the president gets fired, and they're, who are you?
Yeah. And
then you go on to Mercury Records, and the A&R guy gets fired. Who are you? So it just was and the experience of that was just not conducive to creativity in my mind, or supporting artists. So that's why Lazy Bones was formed, is just because I do business because I'm fairly, I think, good at it, but it's not really what I love doing. What I love doing is producing artists and writing songs. And so that's how everything started. And it's kind of continued that way. And we've really found this kind of Lazy Bone sound, for better or worse. And it's sustained us. But you're right, man. It's like, if I don't love the music, and as importantly, love the artist as a person, when I pitch guys like you, they're going to smell the bullshit, right? And I put out very few records every year, so when people know that when we do release something, it's going to be special. There's a ton of care into it. I'm not the kind of person that throws up 30 records on the wall and sees what sticks. So, yeah, and working with people like Mike it's a dream, because he just makes me better. Guys like him and Jordan Rudess and Marco Miniman and Tony Levin, to work with guys of that caliber, I really have to up my game. I mean, whenever I send back Mike my interpretation of what he's done, I'm shitting bricks. So my balls just shrivel up into me whenever I send stuff to Mike, just praying that he'll get it and he'll understand what I'm doing, and he does. So yeah, so sorry for that long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I come from, is loving the artist and loving the music. If I don't have those two elements in it, I can't do it. I'm not interested.
There's definitely an attitude, and there's a sensibility that surrounds. I mean, even with just 2 albums we've done, there's a specific sensibility to MFTJ, and it's very much Scott's sensibility. And I'm totally cool with that. I've got my solo albums to just liberally splatter my own sensibility on. So one of the things I like about MFTJ is like offering my creativity in a completely different context, and then having the final tone of it being so shaped by Scott's sensibility. Although I do have input on that, and he'll say, "What do you think of this, dude?" And I'll tell him what I think. But as far as is it joy? I mean, yes, I think it's a joyful thing, but it can be dark too. But I absolutely do. There really is such as dark joyfulness, and if and maybe this is that to some extent, because King Crimson, for instance, there is this kind of sinister undercurrent to a lot of their stuff. It's undeniable. It's there in the name from the get-go, but it's joyful to see that stuff executed and to experience it at when they're really on their game and it's coming at you in maximum power. It's joyful, but there's still this kind of murky, dark undercurrent to the actual material or the sensibility. It's quite possible to have both, and Scott and I do have like different sensibilities. I can get dark, I can get weird, but it almost always ends up chirpy somehow. Because I'm a cheerful guy, and I don't want to, there's a part of me that just doesn't want to bother anybody. But I still feel as weird as dark as anybody. Scott is more willing to like really linger there and have the final product reflect that. And but it's fun. There's no doubt about it. It's really fun. Making these songs is incredibly fun. And I do think that that's very much reflected in the titles.
Each track is a sound world, and it's not necessarily, there's not a thread to me when listening straight through that ties one thing to the next to the next. It feels like you're building individual worlds.
Yeah, I am, but at the same time, I didn't want this to be a jam record. Like, to me, one thing I like about this project, and Mike and I think consciously did this, is, and Anthony, you being a songwriter, you understand that there's, an intro, and there's verse, chorus, bridge, outro. I wanted to kind of build that in to, and it's especially prevalent in the first record more than this new one, to make it more of a song and to keep it short. So when it ends, people will want more. So I think consciously we did on a lot of songs put that song structure into each track. But I just, sometimes I'll literally have a melody in my head at night, and I have a tape recorder near my bed, and I'll hum in something and then go the next day into the studio and plunk it away on piano or bass. And usually I start with the drums, and everything's to a click track. And so, ideas just come from wherever, or I'll have a big sample library that I throw in something that'll inspire me to write something further. But it's mostly based on rhythm, because, being a drummer for as long as I have, it really starts with a solid drum beat. And I've done a lot of hip hop in my life, so that's really important to me. And I wanted to bring a lot more hip hop flavor into this new record.
You have to be willing to let the process take its time. It's not a type of thing you can knock off in a weekend, because it's essentially a conversation between me and Scott, and it's one that, in the case of the second record especially, evolved over the course of months, because what was different from the first record to the second for me was, on the first record I really had no choice, because we were paying for studio time to do my stuff really quickly. So all of my instrumental contributions to the first album were completed in 3 days. For this album, I was working at home, which meant inevitably that I was because a little scalpel is a dangerous thing when you have access to the tools of the means of production. At least I will end up drilling down, and it ends up taking more time. And then, it was the first album that I was working on in its entirety during the pandemic, after getting a new studio set up, and so psychologically I was reeling, just like everybody was. And when I see the videos, the making of videos of me sitting in the studio talking about making the songs, I look like a prisoner to me. Because I was just like still in shock. It was whatever, June and July or something, that I was working on this stuff early enough to the beginning of the pandemic that I hadn't gotten sassy about, this is just the way it is now. And because I'm totally used to it now. I'm totally used to lockdown. I'm totally used to being at home, not going anywhere. At the time I was still in shock. So that had a lot to do. I mean, I hear that a lot when I listen to what I played on the record. I'm glad that it comes to you as joyful, because to me it's like pandemic tunes, it's an do it. but given that, I it's also a triumph, because it to take this stuff that I played in that frame of mind, and Scott wasn't exactly having an easy time of it either. We were both freaking out, but by the time it ends up being done, to me it is joyful. When I listen to this stuff now, it just turns me on so much. I really love this music. The second, especially. First album is great, but to me, like I said the other day, to me it's simultaneously deeper and higher. It just seems to expand the world of it. And just in headphones, listen to this stuff, and it doesn't matter that I'm on the records. I never know what's coming next. When I'm listening to this stuff, I have no idea what section is going to be, and there's always something going on that surprises me, and it tickles me, because I'm on the thing, and I recognize the fact that that's me, but it's still, like you say, it's not Mike Keneally music in that sense. And I actually we did work out the running order. I mean, you're right in saying that it's just 11 separate stories rather than a flow. But we did, discuss the running order of the album real specifically, and I do think that it has a really good flow. I'm very happy with if you took those If you shuffle those 11 songs in another order, it wouldn't be as cool.
How should people be buying this from you?
They could go to our page on Bandcamp, which is great. And we have all our videos up on there as well. Or they can go to lazybones.com. And that's where it's available. So please support us. We need to pay our rent.
And any other, like, while they're at the Lazy Bones website or on the Lazy Bones Bandcamp, other than MFTJ, what do you think are one or two albums that they should check out? You know, limited time, but they're there. What should they be looking at?
Oh boy. I would say probably 11 Minimum Rudis from the Law Offices of, which is a really cool record. And probably Marco Miniman's Eeps, which is a really fun record that I love doing with him. So those two would be probably my kind of go-to records.